Hello, I'm Mark Williams, and earlier in 2021, Gethyn and myself started the Phit Podcast. Here at GethynandEllis.com and Wide End Limited, we know that whilst physical fitness is essential, our mental health is vital too, and our Phit Podcast is all about putting the human back into technology, aka Phit. Building on us all coping during unprecedented times in Series 1, available on our website www.GethynandEllis.com and YouTube, search for Gethyn Ellis, we felt in Series 2 it might help us all to hear more thoughts and advice from normal, everyday humans just like you. So we're again speaking with a range of humans in technology, business, consulting and other areas to hear what they've learned and how they intend to apply that experience in dealing with today's challenges and their futures.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we are still talking to Matt Sims, the head of technology for HTB Church. This is part 2 of Matt's podcast. Welcome back, Matt.
Hello, good to be back.
And then I'm going to ask Mark to kick us off. I think it's his turn to go first.
So this question's about where organisations are really, and whether the word transformation is used an awful lot. We all see it everywhere that we go, but also, not that many years ago, people were talking about continual improvement as being, the way forwards. I do have a particular bee in my bonnet about this particular one, but do you think that it was interesting when you mentioned something earlier about things were already on your roadmap and they got accelerated in the previous part to this. Do you think most organisations do genuinely need to transform, i.e., do something completely different, or in a very different way, or whatever? Or do you think it's more about continuing improvement, or somewhere in between?
I definitely think it's more about continuing improvement. I think digital transformation is a nice marketing phrase that people use to try and sell you a change that you don't necessarily need. And I think it's more about evolution. The reason why any business is successful is that they're doing really well in their particular field. So rather than completely do like a 90-degree turn or even a 180, I think digital change or digital evolution should be along the lines that make most sense to what you're strong at and what people come to you for. For us, obviously, as a church, we were never going to go into like online gaming or anything like that. But
sure,
actually, we have. But I'll talk about that a bit later. But it's more about looking for the opportunity and making sure that it aligns with your values and aligns what your current users and current customers expect.
Do you think sometimes, though, Matt, and because I'm very much of the continuing improvement thing as well, but do you think sometimes organisations who are good at what they do maybe see something as being completely different to what they do when in fact it's not? And the example I'm going to quote here is when Netflix put Blockbusters out of business, and they approached Blockbuster and said, look, let's do a streaming service, let's do this. And they went, no, that's not what we do. Whereas when you're looking back in hindsight, it's easy and go, oh, it is actually very similar to what you do, but you haven't got to worry about taking the thing back and taking the DVD back or taking the video back or whatever it is you've rented from them. So do you think it's I guess it's having the ability to see that might feel alien to the guy, and they obviously did, to the guys at Blockbusters, for them to say no. And then you look at like Dyson as another example, where he tried to sell his vacuum cleaner to all the big vacuum cleaner manufacturers, and because they couldn't sell bags every month, you couldn't have to buy a new bag for your vacuum cleaner. They all said no, and you never make any money. And it's not a massive change. It's a subtle change, but no one got on board, no one saw it, and they lost out as a result. So let me say, I think that's more continual change, and I think that is the continual improvement. And I think 90-degree turn sideways, you do have to slow down a little bit to do that safely, or you end up just rolling over. But I think sometimes it depends on the gap, doesn't it? The size of the turn. Perhaps 90 degrees is a bit too much.
That Dyson thing. Looking back, the Hoover companies probably thought it missing out on the opportunity really sucks.
Oh, how long have you waited to get that one in somewhere?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I don't really know many examples of companies that have failed to do it well. I mean, I guess there's some examples like IBM not buying Windows or Atari turning down Nintendo. But I guess those are more acquisitions than major changes. But yeah, I think it's also important having the right people in your organization who already have plans for the future, because I think we were just quite fortunate that people had already planned what the next steps could be, and we had leadership in place who were open to the change, because I think that's quite key. I think quite a lot of leadership, especially at the C-suite level, can be quite risk averse, and so they just want to hold on to what they're doing and try not to burn too much money on something that may not succeed. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting observation, that, Matt. I mean, so I'm just not about blowing one's trumpet here, but a lot of people, I talk to a lot of C-suite, people doing transformation does pay my bills, even though I actually think it's much more about, should be more about continual improvement. You're right. A lot of people at that level are very risk averse, and I think they often seek certainty about doing something. Well, my own view is what they should be seeking is clarity around doing something. So, it is a bit of a risk. Fine, we accept that it's a bit of a risk, and we're gonna limit it by doing the following things. And if it doesn't work, fine, we'll have learned something, for whatever the next thing is that we're going to do. But we're I've worked with a few leaders who are like that, and it's so refreshing, because and I guess that was one thing I was going to say about the word transformation, even though I've shared my colours there. The one thing I would say is that when people get on board with a word like transformation, it often allows people to believe that they can think differently from their day job. So, if you're talking IT for a moment, when you go out and you say what your requirements to do something, we all know that most users tell you exactly what they've been doing today rather than what they think their requirement might be for the future. So we'll see. I don't know whether we've lost Matt there or not. Geth, he's back.
He's there, mate.
He was frozen a little bit on my screen, so I don't know where that was the case.
Yeah,
all right.
Okay now.
Cool. Well, let's Mark, we'll move on with the next question.
Yes.
So I think that's my turn. Most organizations want to drive value from their data and technology, and you've alluded to some of the things that you guys have done over the last couple of years in particular, but the plans you had in place anyway. How do you think the sort of technology and people solutions should be weighted or balanced?
Explain a bit in more detail. I mean, how do you mean?
So how would you look to make use of data in growing your business, and how would you look after your people in that process? I guess
the subsidiary questions, Matt, just to help you with this, is when is enough data?
Yeah.
And how do I know I've got enough data? And where's the judgment factor in that from the people side of things? Where you encourage, are you balancing volumes of data, whatever it is, or are you saying need to encourage leadership?
I think the most interesting question here, Matt, and you've alluded to it, is do you guys use data to make decisions in what you do? I think that's the first question I'm interested in anyway. And then the people bit can follow along after. We'll keep it nice and simple. Is like, do you use data-driven decision making currently? I guess is a question I'd like to know the answer to, if you're allowed to answer.
I mean, yeah, it's a good question, and now I understand what you're asking. I think we're quite an interesting organization in that our HDB is a church full of clergy who are appointed to lead people and deliver spiritual growth, spiritual leadership. So there's an element there where their instincts and their thoughts about things don't necessarily have to follow data, but then equally they are quite open to, and they want to know. So for example, when we moved over to online services last year, we looked at data behind at which point a video did suddenly people drop off.
Wow.
And at what point what was being said at that time, and then we kind of adjusted the message during subsequent online services to make it more relevant and something that, I guess they just cut bits out when they wasn't going to be successful.
Oh, that's massively interesting in its own right, because Netflix do that when they're writing stories for their they look at when people tune out, and that's why people sit and watch Netflix box sets for so long, is because the stories are written so you don't turn them off. And that's interesting. That's really interesting.
It is. I'm not sure how much is going on now, because I think they got to a level where they had a steady enough readership or followership that it didn't really matter anymore, because they were sustaining quite a high level of numbers. But it was definitely something in the early days we thought about.
Yeah, well.
Just as an aside, Matt, and just say no if you're not comfortable answering this question. It won't be an issue at all. I'm wondering how the church is structured from a leadership perspective. So I do a fair bit of work in the not-for-profit worlds, and broadly you have a bunch of executives who are essentially paid executives of the organisations, MD, FD, and so on and so forth, and then you'll have an overriding board, which will be representatives of whatever the charity or is that you're representing. So essentially, they are practitioners in that discipline, as opposed to I don't want to be unkind when I'm saying this, as opposed to leadership experts, for one of a better way of saying it. Is your organisation run along similar lines, or do you have, you talked about the clergy there, and that do you have sort of I don't know, focus groups or user groups out there that you've got, I don't know, hundreds of clergy that are commenting on, feeding back the data on whether people have, in that example, dropped off at a certain time. So I'm trying to understand the mix of people who are working within the organization, so seeing this data and participating in the leadership type, stakeholder type discussions, versus people who are associated with the organization, but effectively on the outside of that. So they're not employees, but they may be providing some overall guidance, or they may be informing a user group of some description.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not sure about user group, but the church, or most Church of England churches, have a parochial church council, which is kind of like a board for a normal charity.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who will have people who are, I guess it's like non-executive directors, people who've got experience in different areas and comment on things. So we'll have people from tech startups, we'll have people from banking, we'll have people from all kinds of backgrounds, like doctors, even cybersecurity companies. And they will feed in. They will say, we think this is working, and they'll also be church members, so they'll be part of groups. So I guess
sounds similar. Okay.
The church, the focus group would be the congregation, because they already have the existing relationships where they can feedback. We don't think this is working well. We think we should be doing this. We don't really like this kind of worship online because it hurts our ears. That kind of thing.
Sure.
Not that happens very often.
So that's that you almost already have that sort of inbuilt check and balance between the data and the more instinctive, subjective type of dialogue that's going on, because that's what you've been doing for years, in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because I don't think it's thought of as data. It's just thought of as, we've heard this from this group, but actually it's a feedback mechanism that has been going on for decades, if not centuries. Yeah,
indeed. There's got to be a title in there, Gethyn, about feedback going on for centuries, I think. But I'll have to ponder that one offline. So last couple of questions, Matt, and then we'll try and bring this to a close in the not too distant. Is it me now, Geth?
Yes, you may. Off you go.
So what advice would you give to your younger self, or indeed those starting out on their careers now? Could be about IT, doesn't have to be about IT, but what would you want to pass on to you of a while ago, or any other people coming out of the school or university system as we speak?
Start paying into your pension straight away. It's never too late, but it's
never too early.
Yeah. But funny enough, there's a note to self there on that one. Looking at me, but
I think also, I think one trend I've seen, especially amongst graduates, is that when they have their first job, they're not quite sure whether it's what they want to do. And so you can feel it in that they don't hold on to it too tightly enough sometimes. And the ones that succeed seem to be the ones that kind of, even if it's not necessarily what they want to do, they go completely 100% into it. And so I think probably the best advice is back to what I was saying about opportunities. Don't reject anything just because it may not feel like what you want to do long term. Pick everything up, use everything as a learning opportunity. If you can learn about administration, which is one of the hardest skills to do in an office, I mean, it's seen as an entry-level thing, but actually being a good administrator is not easy. And if you can learn that quite early on, it will really set you up later on in your career. And yeah, just give everything your best. Look for opportunities to learn more about business. Speak to people. Don't stick to yourself. Try and keep your circle of friends as wide as possible. So not just the people you normally hang out with, but speak to the person who you see in the finance office. Go and talk to someone in HR. Anyone in the organisation you can potentially learn from.
Cool. We've got a few there, Geth, haven't we?
Yeah, one or two. Awesome. And then Matt, we'll bring us to a close. We've got one more question, and it's a bit of a fun one. Tell us a fun fact about yourself that perhaps nobody else knows.
Oh, I think probably the only person who knows this is my other half. But yeah, when I was 21, I went off to China to study Chinese as part of my degree. And while I was there, I got a job because I thought it'd be a good idea to earn a bit of money while I was out there to cover traveling expenses, that kind of thing. And I got a job working for a guy called Stone Klitz, and we were basically in an old Chinese abandoned army camp in the middle of winter. It was minus 25 degrees. And they got us to teach. They had about 1,000 kids in there. They're all paying about £70 a week, which was not inconsiderable for China in 2002. And they had a bunch of foreign teachers, including me, go around each class singing Western pop songs.
Now, I now want to know what was number one in 2002. Where's Google?
Spice Girls or Venga Boys or what songs do you sing, Matt?
They picked the classics, so there was My Heart Will Go On.
Celine Dion.
There was also Country Roads by
Mr. Campbell.
Is it? Yeah,
it was Glenn Campbell originally, wasn't it? Country Roads.
Could be, yeah.
Cool.
And then, yeah, there's a few other songs that we sang that I can't remember, but every time they come up on the radio,
you remember.
You know all the words when they're
a very vivid memory.
I can safely say we've never had anything quite like that before.
No.
It had nothing really to do with IT except made me realise I didn't really want to become a teacher.
And on that note, pardon the pun, we'll bring that to an end. Matt Sims, thank you very much for joining us. You've been a great guest. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Really enjoyed that.